Anthony Albanese has slammed Woolies for charging customers too much at the checkout. Meanwhile, Peter Dutton has slammed Woolies for dissing Australia Day. So, who wins the Woolies war? Well, Dutton does, and I'll tell you why. Australians understand that Albanese is all talk on cost of living. If he cared about the cost of living crisis, he would have done something when he came to office. Instead, he spent 6 months whinging about Scott Morrison, and then he spent the next 12 months campaigning to insert race into the Constitution, a vanity project 60% of Australians rejected. Now, while all of that was happening, the price of fuel, power, housing and food were going through the roof. With the referendum blown to pieces by a public who refused to be bullied, and with his popularity in freefall, Albanese has finally, belatedly, eventually, at last decided, I better focus on cost of living. He had, after all, promised before the election that he had a plan.
The cost of everything is going up, but your pay isn't. Petrol, groceries, rent, childcare, healthcare. The costs keep piling up and have been piling up for some time now. The truth is, if you want real, permanent, meaningful help with the cost of living, you need a plan to get wages growing again. And you need a Labor government to do it.
So we voted for a Labor government, and for the past 18 months we've been on the edge of our seats, eager to know what the plan is. And now we know. The plan is to point at the nearest supermarket and insist it's them. They're the ones who are responsible.
Farmers are providing produce at cheaper levels, but that isn't being passed on to consumers, and it's not good enough. We need to make sure that people are treated fairly and they get a fair go. It's not acceptable to see record profits at a time when people are doing it so tough.
So there you have it. There's the plan. The PM this week announced a review into the supermarket code of conduct that will report back something to someone or other in about 6 months' time. Meanwhile, we're expected to applaud his leadership while continuing to pay through the nose for goods made more expensive by his ridiculous energy policy, irresponsible IR changes and stubborn refusal to provide tax relief on fuel. We're not buying Woolies and we're not buying Albanese either. Meanwhile, Peter Dutton took the supermarket giant to task over its decision not to stock Australia-themed merchandise in the lead-up to our National Day. Dutton called the decision an outrage and told 2GB listeners,
for Woolworths to start taking political positions to oppose Australia Day is against the national interest, the national spirit.
Hard to argue with that, and for good measure, he added this.
I think people should boycott Woolworths. I would advise very strongly to take your business elsewhere, to go to IGA or Coles or Aldi. And I think until we get common sense out of a company like Woolworths, I don't think they should be supported by the public.
Now, Coles, incidentally, came out and said they would stock Australia Day items. Lefty commentators can call it a silly culture war if they like, but Coles management evidently decided the bullets were real. Dutton, meanwhile, went a step further, taking aim at Woolies boss Brad Banducci.
Brad Banducci's following in the CEO mould of Alan Joyce and doubling down and deciding that they're not going to stock these materials to celebrate our National Day.
Well, drop the mic, Peter Dutton. It's still very much in the public consciousness that Qantas boss Alan Joyce politicised the airline in return for political favours. Dutton's charge that we've now politicised supermarkets will resonate with voters. Everyone knows the Albanese government is hardly a supporter of Australia Day. I mean, God knows they can barely stand to display the Australian flag during their own press conferences. So no one doubts that they are only too happy to have Woolies insist that our National Day is not worth celebrating. In this way, Labor's progressive left agenda is advanced by Woolies, but without Albanese's fingerprints left at the crime scene. The government response to Dutton was as hilarious as it was predictable. Queensland Senator Murray Watt was rolled out to dismiss Dutton's war on Woolies as silly culture war games.
Our government is focused on the war on inflation. Peter Dutton is always focused on a culture war. Our government is focused on the prices that supermarkets charge. Peter Dutton is focused on the kind of thongs that supermarkets sell.
Give me a break. Next, they'll tell us the arsonist is focused on the war on fire. This government has done zero about inflation, leaving all the heavy lifting to the Reserve Bank of Australia and then demonising its former boss, Philip Lowe, for increasing rates. As for Murray Watt's insistence that the government is focused on doing something about grocery prices, well, this was his courageous effort.
Well, with Christmas approaching, I've got a very simple message for the big supermarket chains. Hands off our ham. Right now, the major retailers are charging $8 a kilo for Christmas hams. I want to make sure that they don't lift those prices over the next couple of weeks. Hands off our ham.
Other things Minister Watt has done to address the cost of living include, nope, that's it, hands off our ham. But to everyone's absolute shock, hands off our ham hasn't brought down prices. So now the government has gone all out. They've appointed one of Elbow's mates to conduct a 6-month review of a voluntary code of conduct to see if it might be amended in some way, perhaps. And if that doesn't make a difference to grocery prices, well, perhaps Murray Watt could make a mitts off our meat video or fingers off our fries. I don't know, here I am doing all the government's thinking for them. What really annoys me, though, is the insistence that Peter Dutton is always focused on a culture war. The progressive left love to do this. They trash the culture and then accuse anyone who dares protest of engaging in a culture war. It's not a war when the culture. It's not a war on the culture when Labor dismantle everything. It's only a war when someone dares to say no to their revolutionary agenda. Dutton shouldn't be intimidated, as if anyone would be intimidated by our beta Prime Minister or by Murray hands off our ham Watt. Dutton is on a winner on this if he sticks to his guns. Middle Australia is sick of having their country trashed by progressives who know nothing but stoking division for political gain. Woolies are yet to realise the truism of go woke, go broke. But Peter Dutton is starting to realise the truism of go hard in favour of traditional Australia rather than the globalist mash-up of diverse identities favoured by the left. Become Prime Minister.